do you see any relationship between Lula's case and Julian's case, and what can we expect from the British courts?
Well, clearly, the case that was taken against Lula was a political case. It was lawfare. It was another instance of lawfare. It's very interesting, even before the whole Lava Jato case was revealed. It was quite extraordinary how much Judge Moro was bigged up in the US media. Suddenly they were talking about this judge, how was he a judge or a prosecutor?
He was both.
Okay. Yes, I couldn't quite remember.
Yeah, because he was both.
I remember reading about the man who was instrumental in the case against Lula and how he was being elevated in the US press, and I thought this is quite extraordinary. And of course, it's par for the course when we saw what happened, what was revealed about how involved the US was. We know in Julian's case that as early as July 2010, before the first arrest warrant was issued by Sweden, before Julian had even gone to Sweden, a whole week or 10 days before Julian left for Sweden, the United States State Department was contacting its closest allies in Europe and saying, find a way to stop this guy, find a way to bring a case against him. At the time, of course, the United States knew that Julian and WikiLeaks were going to publish about Iraq, were going to publish about the State Department, and the United States was desperately trying to prevent this from happening. Of course, WikiLeaks at the time had made partnerships with other publications. Daniel Ellsberg had a backup copy, so even if something had happened to Julian, the publications would continue. But the US State Department, of course, was indicating to its allies to use the criminal justice system as a way to further its political goals, in this case to silence Julian. And this is what we've seen eventually with the over the past, since 2010, that the attack on Julian has been on many different fronts. Political attacks on his person, financial, banking blockade on WikiLeaks and on Julian specifically, and of course legal as well. And that the case that has been brought against Julian is a front through which the United States has used and abused the legal system, the criminal justice system, in order to imprison him and try to silence him.
When Lula was about to be arrested, he conveyed a huge amount of supporters in the union, and he said, I'm giving myself to prison because they cannot imprison me. I am an idea. And the heart of each of them. And so is Julian. And I often say that to my public, whilst the persecution of Lula was authoritarian, I find the persecution of Julian Assange totalitarian. It's another scale. I don't know if you...
Well, I'd like to personally thank from the bottom of my heart President Lula for bringing Julian up repeatedly and for supporting him for so long, not just recently, but he is, I think, understood even before he experienced the same thing himself, that Julian is a geopolitical prisoner, that Julian tried to and succeeded in actually bringing to light the criminality and corruption that was being committed against the peoples of Iraq and Afghanistan, but also the violation of long-standing principles and agreements, for example, in relation to to Brazil, as you brought up. And this is crucial because we've witnessed over the many years that Julian has been persecuted and made to suffer, that the legal system has failed in withstanding political pressure, and that in a situation such as this, in such an enormously cruel case such as this, it necessitates people of Lula's standing, not just in terms of Lula's political clout, but also moral standing, to speak out. Because the attack on Julian is really a departure from a world in which democratic ideals have been upheld, to a new world in which they are held in contempt. And of course, this means we are in a global community in which, if those long-standing principles of human rights, of democracy, of openness, are not respected and are in fact scorned, then the whole edifice falls apart. Julian's case is about Julian. It's about our family being separated. It's about Julian's survival, but it's also about bigger principles that Julian and WikiLeaks embodied boldly, protected activities of journalism, of the right to truth, of holding governments that were committing crimes, war crimes, covering them up, holding them to account. And if Julian is allowed to continue to suffer and remain imprisoned, then all these ideals that we've fought so hard for so long, and which were have long been a principled ideal of where the kind of world we want to live in, all that falls apart. So I'm extremely grateful to Lula, because when he speaks, everyone listens. The press listens. When he calls them cowards, you can be sure that they are listening, and they need to hear it. They need to hear it to their face. And of course, Lula is a global leader. There's no question about that. And it is that kind of leadership that that changes the course and the direction and makes a new political reality possible. So I think lots of people around the world, lots of governments and the press are listening very intently to what Lula is saying.